Why are many liberal democracies worldwide backsliding and heading towards civil conflict? I'm Tristan Harris, co-host of Your Undivided Attention, the podcast that you're about to listen to. In this episode with our guest Barbara F. Walter, we're going to be exploring the implications of social media on liberal democracy. Once this ends, you can watch the full episode by heading over to the Center for Humane Technology's YouTube channel, which is linked in the description below. I think making this real for people, in October 2021, Tucker Carlson Originals published a video about January 6th, presupposing a war against the people, a purge of our patriots, and that the left is hunting the right and sticking them in Guantanamo Bay. So when you have the rhetoric that, one side is actually threatening everyone on your side, and there's been many examples for people on the right who see overreaches by the left, calling everyone who's on the right or who voted for Donald Trump in the last election homophobic, racist, misogynistic, white supremacist. And when they see this egregious overreach by the left at saying to the right that all of you, if you voted for a person, therefore are all those adjectives, then it makes it easier for someone like Tucker Carlson to say, see, they're calling everyone who voted for Donald Trump a domestic terrorist. And when they can point to a simple example, like the fact that, I don't know if it's the FBI or CISA, or I forgot which organization, has, a domestic terrorism unit that they've been staffing up, and that mostly they're worried about right-wing extremists, Tucker Carlson can spin that and say that means that they're going after all of us on the right. And this is the kind of ways that the hologram and the holographic sort of prism of all these different worldviews colliding leads to more and more escalation, which gets us to really what we really want to talk about, which is now that we've established the factors of superfactionalism, ethnic entrepreneurship, anocracy, how is social media an accelerant to these forces?
Yeah, so I should start by saying we have hunches, but we don't yet have the hard evidence that this is in fact happening. The reason we don't have hard evidence that shows a causal link, for example, between the rise of social media or Facebook usage and the decline of liberal democracy or the rise of ethnic nationalism is because scholars don't have access to the data, which companies like Facebook have been jealously guarding. In the absence of those data, we can't prove that this is in fact true. It's why I found Frances Haugen's, she was the Facebook whistleblower. Her testimony was so powerful because in the tens of thousands of pages of Facebook material that she turned over, it was clear that Facebook has been analyzing its own data, and it actually knows that this that it is having these effects, and it simply has not been willing to release the data. But what we have are hunches, but these are really important and powerful hunches, and they're based on trends that we're seeing. So the number of democracies around the world had been increasing for over 100 years until 2010. So it had become sort of just this pattern that everybody thought would continue. The world every year was becoming more democratic. There were, a few, the 1930s and 40s, there were some downturns, but generally the trend was up. The expectation in even at the turn of the last century was that all we had to do was wait, and eventually the whole world would become liberal democracies. And then that halted in 2010. And not only have we seen declines in the number of democracies around the world every year since then, but we have seen something that we've never seen before, which is that our most liberal democracies, the democracies that were considered sacrosanct, they have been declining as well. And I gave you the example of the United States, but the same thing to a lesser degree has been happening in the UK, in Sweden, in countries that we just never thought we would see this. And there's no good explanation for this. Why is this happening now when it has never happened in these countries? Why is it not only happening now, but it's happening across all of these countries? The second big trend that we're seeing is the rise of ethnic nationalism. Ethnicity and identity is not only becoming much more important across countries, but societies are dividing more stringently along that line, and you're seeing more hate crimes based on a sense of the dominant group in these countries protecting their privilege, whether that's Hindus in India who represent the vast majority of Indians. They feel threatened and they're forming far right parties around it, or in Brazil, or in the Philippines, or here in the United States. So you're seeing the rise of not only hate crimes, but also these ethnically based far right parties. So you're seeing this around the world, and it's all happening around the same time, starting 2006, escalating in 2010. And then one of the really interesting things that I found is, if you look to see, if you follow democratic decline around the world, every region in the world was experiencing economic decline prior to 2019, except Africa. Africa continued to increase its number of democracies. It was the only region that was bucking the trend until 2019. What was different about Africa? Well, there were lots of things that were different, but it was the region that was the last to get the internet. Internet penetration in Africa was extremely low. And then, of course, eventually, the internet and social media came to Africa as well. And that's when you started also to see the decline of democracy in that region. So social scientists, we're seeing all of these patterns and trends that we've never seen before. It's not just, these are interesting trends that are blowing our mind. How is it possible that liberal democracy is declining? How is it possible that we're seeing, the rise of far right, ethnically based parties everywhere? And really, the only big transformation that happened at the same time was the rise of not only social media, but that social media became one of the main sources of information for citizens around the world.
Hey, Tristan Harris here again. Check out the second half of this episode on the Center for Humane Technology's YouTube channel, which is linked in the description below. And on our channel, we talk about radically reimagining today's technology and how we can catalyze a more humane future.